So here's a big question that has come in. Will the schools reopen in America? And this one's connected a little bit to the question, will there be a second wave hit of the coronavirus in the fall? Will the schools be able to reopen? And the answer is they are really going to try to reopen no matter what happens. And they're working on it. But there are hurdles, there are problems. Number one is probably buses. They're saying that's the biggest hurdle because so many people are using for so many years have used buses and busing. They don't know how to solve this problem. If only 3 or 4 students can be on one bus, what are they going to do? They're already trying to figure out how to get parents to drive, but they are working on this. Two of the biggest policies that they're trying to work on, number one, is to make sure that the school kids know how to obey strict public health laws, and they will be giving these to children almost every single day. And they're tough and they're rigorous, and they expect the children to comply and to be compliant so that the rest of their lives they can be compliant with rules on lockdown. And number two is how to make sure that the school kids know what to think about the protests and the riots from the latest politically correct position. So I'm studying this. Education Week, the magazine, is making demands of schools to issue statements and to take actions which, quote, will ultimately make a difference in the dismantling of white supremacy and anti-black racism that occurs within and beyond schools. So they're saying that this is what we will have to be working on within the school system. It also says we also insist, and so the system is insisting that leaders, teachers, principals cite black people explicitly as opposed to referring broadly to, quote, people of color or historically disadvantaged communities. All right, so these are just some of the things that are coming out in the way of direction as they get ready for the schools to reopen. The orders from the top are also commanding the leaders in the schools, the principals and the teachers, to use words that explicitly name racial violence. Do not soften the intensity of systemic racism with broad language about diversity, equity, and inclusion. They said, don't soften it. Just say what is most politically correct. If the statements that you make, it says, do not include words such as racism and racist and white supremacy and anti-blackness, then your statements are insufficient and therefore should be revised. That's what it's saying here. So how much do you really know about what your teachers are being instructed to teach in the fall on how to talk and how to act like racists? I mean, that's the most honest way we can put this. Now, let me tell you why. It's totally okay if your children never go back to the school, ever go back to the schools, even if they do reopen. A parent was given this by her child's school and is keeping the name of the school confidential. I will keep the name of the school confidential, but this is what students and parents can expect if and when the schools reopen. Once assigned to a class, and this comes straight from the school planners. Once assigned to a class, students will spend their entire day, including lunchtime, in their assigned seats. So once they show up, they've got to go straight to their assigned seat and stay there the entire day. Students must expect to be regrouped based on the number of students returning. And so they know that not all students will be returning. There has been such an explosion of favor to homeschooling and expressions of loyalty to this system of independent learning and academic freedom. They realize that a lot of students will not be coming back. The next point, students must not expect to return to their regular class with their classmates because everything's going to be changed and reorganized. Your child may not be with the same teachers as before, as several members of our staff will not be returning to school. Why? It doesn't explain why. It just says, just expect that. That's not going to happen. Teachers not returning to school will continue working and keeping close contact with students remotely from home as recommended by the government. Activities completed while in school will not be evaluated or graded. Okay, that's interesting. Did you know that will be true for your your children, if they go back there? How much instruction will there be given? And activities completed will not be evaluated or graded. Next, no physical materials will be transported back and forth between home and school. Students must include a mini garbage and recycling bag with their lunch in order to collect their personal garbage and dispose of it at home. Okay? Next, all students must bring their personal labeled and filled water bottle, as water fountains won't be available. Next, the sharing of all items, pencils, pens, sharpeners, wax crayons, rulers, and toys, is not permitted. When weather permits, recess breaks will be held outdoors and will entail, and then it describes it, walking outside safely distanced from one another in a prearranged pattern. All right, I'm not finished. There's still more bureaucracy and planning that's going into this. Gatherings, groups of students together, will not be permitted. Limited travel throughout the school by all during the day. Bathroom visits will be monitored and escorted so that proper disinfection by our caretakers can follow before another student uses the facilities. Okay, there may be way more caretakers and janitors and disinfectors and school bus drivers. If you can only put 3 or 4 students on a school bus, how is this going to happen? As per government recommendations, masks and gloves will not be provided. Students are certainly welcome to bring these items from home. They are also invited to carry their own personal disinfecting wipes with them if they wish. Lockers will no longer be used. Students will place their spring and summer jackets behind the chair they will be using and their school bags under their assigned desks, which they will not be able to leave during the school day. There will be no cafeteria service or home and school pizza and frozen yogurt days. There will be no physical activity taking place in the gym. No art classes, although arts and crafts projects can be promoted as home suggestions. No library periods, no drama classes, no fundraisers or after-school activities will take place. Parent volunteers will not be permitted at school. We recommend your child brings a book or 2 of interest from home to read. Students with fever or flu-like symptoms will be returned home. So this is what school will look like. What do you think? How do you think that sounds? Why does this make school sound so much like a prison camp? Well, John Taylor Gatto, the author of The Underground History of American Education, who is a several times New York School Teacher of the Year, said school is, and he finally quit after more than 20 years in the system, and wrote a book about his experiences and tried to think through what he was doing to himself and to his students and to their families by being a part of the system. Here's a quote from him. "School is a 12-year jail sentence where bad habits are the only curriculum truly learned. I teach school and win awards doing it. I should know." And so after he quit and wrote this book, he went around the country speaking about his discoveries. He's no longer living, but his book is extraordinarily powerful and highly recommended. I want to read some more quotes to you from John Taylor Gatto, and we'll get to that next.
To connect with us directly, please visit jeffreybotkin.com and send any questions or thoughts that you might have to questions@jeffreybotkin.com.
We're looking at the question, will the schools reopen in America? And the answer is yes, they will. But I predict that most students will be begging their parents for an alternative. And that option has been so little discussed from the war years, from the 1940s through the 50s, up through the 60s, until the year 2020. The typical answer was, there's no way you can stay home. It's illegal to stay home. You have to go to school. That's just what the law is, and that's what you have to do. You have to show up at school. You have to go to school. You have to show up at kindergarten level at age and stay the whole mandated period up through when I was in school, grade 12. And, I put this question to my father back when I was 10 years old. I was a paper boy. I'll tell you a quick story of what happened. And on the front page of the paper that I was folding one afternoon to deliver to my customers, there was a story that said, "Scientist trains son to be genius." And I read the story, and he had pulled his son out of the school system to teach him at home because that really wasn't a very accurate or honest title for the article. The dad simply wanted to teach the son what he knew the son wasn't getting in school. The ability to think freely and creatively. And I went home that night and I talked to my dad. My dad was a scientist. My dad was a phenomenal teacher. I would have loved to have spent time with my father. And I said, "Dad, how about you do this?" And I showed him the article. "How about we do this, father and son together? You be the teacher. You train me. You teach me the things that are important." And he said, "Well, it's just not possible. It wouldn't be legal. You have to be in school." End of discussion. And that was the end of discussion. That's what happened. And so here's John Taylor Gatto. "I've noticed a fascinating phenomenon in my 25 years of teaching, that schools and schooling are increasingly irrelevant to the great enterprises of the planet." And that's what he could see by firsthand experience. He said, "The secret of American schooling is that it doesn't teach the way children learn, nor is it supposed to. Schools were conceived," and this is what is the predominant part of the historical sections of his book. "Schools were conceived to serve the economy and the social order rather than kids and families, and that's why it is compulsory. You have to," and he explains what happened at the beginnings of the 1900s and how the so-called educators of the time were reforming the schools not to be places where you could learn and learn to be good and learn to be smart, but places where you could learn to conform so that you might fit the purposes of the government and the industry when you would get out. As a consequence, he says, the school cannot help anybody grow up because its prime directive is to retard maturity. Quote, another quote from Gatto, "We already have a national curriculum locked up in the 7 lessons of school teaching. Such a curriculum produces physical, moral, and intellectual paralysis." And this is what he can describe in great detail. Physical, moral, and intellectual paralysis. And no curriculum of content will be sufficient to reverse its hideous effects. What is currently under discussion in our national school hysteria about failing academic performance misses the point. Schools teach exactly what they are intended to teach, and they do it well. How to be a good Egyptian and remain in your place in the pyramid. And then he goes on to say, "I want to tell you what the effect is on children of taking all their time from them, time they need to grow up, and forcing them to spend it on abstractions. You need to hear this because no reform that doesn't attack these specific pathologies will be anything more than a facade." So when people would talk to him, "Well, John, what can we do? What can we do to reform the schools?" He said the discussions in the educational establishment simply were not addressing the things that needed to be addressed. So he said, these are the things now that need to be addressed. And I'll close by reading these recommendations and these descriptions that he gives. Number 1, the children I teach are indifferent to the adult world. And he's saying the school system has done this to their heart and their soul and their mind. And that's why they have become indifferent to the world. They've been taught to be indifferent to the world. This defies the experience of thousands of years. A close study of what big people were up to was always the most exciting occupation of youth. But nobody wants to grow up these days, and who can blame them? We play with toys. Number two, the children I teach have almost no curiosity, and what they do have is transitory curiosity. They cannot concentrate for very long, even on things they choose to do, that they choose to do. Can you see a connection between the bells ringing again and again to change classes and this phenomenon of evanescent attention? You know, you just get started on something, the bell rings, and you have to give it up and move on. Number three, the children I teach have a poor sense of the future, of how tomorrow is inextricably linked to today. And as I said before, they have a continuous present. The exact moment they are at is the boundary of their consciousness. Number four, the children I teach are ahistorical. They have no sense of how past has predestined their own present, limiting their choices, shaping their values and lives. The children I teach are cruel to each other. They lack compassion for misfortune. They laugh at weakness, and they have contempt for people whose need for help shows too plainly. The children I teach are uneasy with intimacy and candor. My guess is that they are like many adopted people I've known in this respect. They cannot deal with genuine intimacy because of a lifelong habit of preserving a secret inner self inside a larger outer personality made up of artificial bits and pieces of behavior borrowed from television or acquired to manipulate teachers. Because they are not who they represent themselves to be, the disguise wears thin in the presence of intimacy, so intimate relationships have to be avoided. How many friends did you have for whom that was true? Number seven, the children I teach are materialistic, following the lead of school teachers who materialistically grade everything, and television mentors who offer everything in the world for free. The children I teach are dependent, passive, and timid in the presence of new challenges. This is frequently masked by surface bravado, or by anger or aggressiveness, but underneath is a vacuum without fortitude. And so this is what Gatto has learned about school, and why I believe in the year 2020, when children came home by the millions, and I remember this spring when the total count of children were at home was 3 million children at one time. And the children were showing the parents some of the assignments that they had, and the parents were seeing some of the work and the busy work that the children had been given, and how it really was not real education. And the children speaking to them about how they were benefiting from simply being free to study the things that they wanted to study, and to spend time with their brothers and sisters who had been not included in their peer group because of the grade segregation that they had to live by. And then finally, how the children were really pleased that they were being able to spend time with their own parents and ask them questions about life and get context, which John Taylor Gatto said that the children lacked. And so I was brought up in the government school system, and I can identify with every single one of these things, and this is one reason why my young wife and I, when we were first married and started having children, made the decision that we would never put our children in a government classroom, but would keep them home to the best of our ability and give them academic freedom, which we did. And so 7 children later, we've been very happy that we did that, and would never consider recommending the government system to anyone for the reasons that this one school teacher, John Taylor Gatto, has warned us about. And so if the schools do reopen, and they will reopen to the best of their ability, consider your options. If you need to get additional help from your community, grandparents or trusted neighbors who can help you with the challenges of teaching and the challenges of providing for your family, challenges of negotiating this whole new environment that we will all be living in, then do that. I mean, we're going to have to think creatively on our feet, and we can do this together. And this is one reason why I so strongly recommend getting to know your neighbors and your community in coming up with a different and a better system.
If you like content like this, please consider subscribing. If you know others who would benefit from this material, please share it with them.